Morning, everyone. Welcome for those of you who are joining us on our first panel today. Welcome back to those of you who are with us this morning for a fascinating discussion. It's very nice to see so many of you joining us again. For our session over the next hour, we're going to be talking about the importance of culture, well-being, and values. How, particularly in the retail space, we've motivated and are trying to keep staff loyal. It's been a real challenge over the last year with all of the changes during lockdown, furlough, in work, out of work, how we've worked really hard as an HR community to motivate and keep our staff engaged. My name's Mock O'Keefe. I'm the founder of the innovation Beehive. After what someone described as decades working in HR, I joined the dark world of consulting and founded the business 11 years ago to accelerate the potential of organizations, teams, leaders, and brands. We take our inspiration from the world of innovation and use that mindset and processes and tools to work on HR challenges in leadership, culture, and pure play innovation capability. But you're not here to hear from me today. You're here to speak and hear from our fantastic panelists. We've got a great session lined up for you. So I'd like just to go around, give everyone the chance to introduce themselves, and then we will kick off. So Alison, do you want to say contestant number one, who you are, what's your name, where you come from?
Good morning. Yes, hello everyone. My name's Alison. I'm the People Director at Cook. If you haven't heard of us, we're based in Sittingbourne in Kent, where we actually make handmade meals. We also have a delicious puddings kitchen in Somerset. We're quite unusual in that we're a vertically integrated business in that we source, buy, make, distribute and sell our product. So it's a fascinating place to work, and I've been there 8 years.
And I know when we were having our rehearsal yesterday, we were all talking about how you have kept us nourished over the last year. So you've done some really exciting innovations. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Una, would you like to say hello?
Yes, hello everyone. Very happy to be here. I work for Unibail-Rodamco-Westfield. I have two roles. One, the HR Ops Director for the UK initially, and the second one, which we'll focus on today, is the Group Engagement Director. Unibail-Rodamco-Westfield, we're on 2 continents, 13 countries, 87 shopping centres, 10 airports, and we have over 70 nationalities. So as well as presenting today, I'm hoping to find out and hear lots from my colleagues on how to continue keeping people engaged at this really challenging time.
Wow, thanks very much. And yeah, that's what it's about. We talked about, steal with glee, understanding what people have actually done.
I have my notepad here, Mock.
Not just taking kind of all the strategic conversation. Actually, what have you done? What's it felt like? Yeah. And hopefully our colleagues will be able to steal with glee today. Super, lovely. Heather, with the fantastic view behind you, I believe calling from your conservatory this morning. Do introduce yourself and say where you work.
Hello, I'm Heather Lee. I'm Head of People at Lincolnshire Co-op. So we have about 220 sites and just under 3,000 colleagues. We're a co-op owned by our members, so supporting the communities we're part of. And our business includes convenience stores, pharmacy, post offices and funeral homes. So for us, the last 12 months has been very challenging as largely an essential retail business.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Lovely. Looking forward to hearing about those challenges and understanding how you overcome them. And then Fabiola, I said it yesterday, with the green wall and the accent following through to the cushion like the Great British Design Challenge. Don't tell me who won. I haven't seen the last episode yet. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you work?
Thank you. Yes, luckily you can't see the rest of the house, that's all I can say. So I'm Chief People Officer at McArthurGlen. Delighted to be with you. McArthurGlen, you may not know or do know the name when you see it at the designer outlet centres around Europe. We run 25 of them with a lot of the big brands that you would know and love, and we're definitely been through a roller coaster of open and close throughout the whole of lockdown across Europe and what we see in Southern Europe. But very excited to say we're about to open a new shopping centre on the 12th of April in the UK, with coming out of lockdown in Cannock in the West Midlands. So we have a very engaged team. Our teams around the centres are amazing when they do, they've been through the open and close of the centres all the time. So there's a lot going on and a lot of support at head office to make that happen. So very exciting, but nonetheless very challenging time. So yeah, keen like everybody here to hear what's out there, what shares some best ideas, and learn from each other. I think that's one of the things in the pandemic now we're all talking about, is how brilliant it's brought out the community aspect of people in so many ways, and that's cross business, cross all sorts of things.
Great, lovely. Good luck with the new store opening, or the new opening. That's fantastic. Lovely. So let's get into the meat of it now. We've all met everyone. Alison, you've done an awful lot of work in Cook over the last year to try and keep engaged during this time of crisis. And one thing that really struck me when we were talking about it in advance was you talked about creating joy, which I really like, helping people find joy in work. I'm interested in two aspects, really. One, in terms of how do you create that joy for your HR team that you're responsible for? And then how do you create that or help people find that joy in the wider organisation?
Yeah, joy at work. Well, one of our values at Cook actually is have fun. And another thing we stand for is that we really focus on people's strengths. So you can spend a lot of energy always trying to improve what you're not very good at. But that's just quite energy draining. So that's kind of the context of where we operate from. I think one of my team reminded me just recently, she's actually an improvisation artist. And so she basically mocked me. She goes, "Do you remember about a year ago you said COVID's coming?" I was like, "Yeah, I did." And I remember at the time they're like, yeah, okay. And I think I look back, and what I tried to do at the very start of my team was communicate and be really honest and say, listen, I'm learning too, with every government update. And I think it just made us part of one complete team where we were just figuring it out. And I think we all felt good being able to then make agreed suggestions to the wider business about what we might do about anything, whether it was sick pay, our retail teams in the shops, how we could operate safely out of our kitchens. So that was the first thing. I think the other thing to say is that my team, sort of the people operations side, we're all HR generalists. And then I've got two other functions that look after learning development and raw talent, which is a whole other wonderful thing at Cook. And we ripped up that way of working and essentially said, if our united purpose is about helping others, let's just get to it. And I think that massively helped. People had a lot of fun. They connected with people they wouldn't normally talk to. We were just basically of service to others. And I think that made us all feel really, really good. And I think the third thing, and this I dug deep myself personally, I think a lot of people that work in HR are very happy to be in the shadows, help others, be of support. We don't like the limelight, actually. And I really made a mental note to celebrate successes with my peer group in the senior leadership team with the business. We actually took stock one day and said, oh my goodness, we've recruited 6 months worth of people in just 3 weeks. Let's just shout about that. That's phenomenal. And we've also done X, Y, Z. So I would say they are the three things. You can never communicate too much. Agree what your shared purpose is, see each other on virtual calls, including see people's life challenges, homeschooling, how do we help each other? Because once that's agreed and up front, that's really helpful. And recognition for people that don't generally like it.
How do you do that though? Because actually, recognition can sometimes feel like a bit of a process, particularly when we're doing it remotely. It's very interesting in terms of how you make that real and authentic. I know, actually, Heather, I might come to you in a second on that because you've done a lot of work on colleague apps and recognition, but how did you make it feel natural, Alison, that people wanted to recognise and didn't feel like, oh, right, it's 4 o'clock on a Thursday, I've got to do my recognition now, I've diarised it. I recognise Una for being Una. Boom, done. Right, what's the next Zoom call?
No, absolutely. I think it literally occurred, it was at the end of a week. I was feeling pretty fatigued myself, and I thought, and I know sometimes when you celebrate success, like you drive home and go, what were the things I did do today, even though it wasn't on my list? It was that type of exercise. And I find telling it as a story is really helpful. And then also to appeal to other people within my peer group, tell it as a KPI, hence the stat about figures, but tell the story. What did that really mean? Rather than, hey, can I just be on a pedestal and shout? Because like I said, that's not my natural style either. So I think that storytelling, I think, is a really nice way to do it and how it's helped others.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. And it contextualizes it as well and makes it more relevant. And maybe when you're telling a story, stories often have a learning or a moral behind them. So super. Yes. Heather, I know you've done a lot of work in the co-op, particularly with your colleague app, but around recognition. Do you want to share a little bit around some of the things that you've done so we can steal with glee from you?
Yes, I mentioned that for the vast majority of our colleagues, they were essential services and required to work throughout. So we already had a colleague app and we worked with Engage Business Solutions on that. We've taken our app forward through this period, really as a way to reach everybody, no matter where they are, what they're doing, what their working pattern is. And we've used that to both nominate and announce colleague awards, and also use the workflow to recognise colleagues who've achieved things that we wanted to shout about. So the app has both a messaging function, a news feed, and a way to connect with other colleagues. And that's proved really powerful for us. But I think at the height of the pandemic, when there was so much uncertainty for everybody, it was also a way for all our colleagues to raise questions and get answers from the most senior people. So you're right, once a day I did have a slot where I did say, right, I go on the app and I answer the questions that are there now, because they're questions that one person's asked, but if they've asked them, the chances are hundreds of other people were thinking of them and wanted an answer. So let's respond to that in that way.
So I think that's interesting, that whole thing about being real-time responsive, being transparent. How do you manage when actually the rules are changing? Where Sharon Ashcroft, who's the Chief People Officer on Trust Ford in the last panel, said, we're making it up as we go along. How do you, as a senior leader, manage that when sometimes you just don't know the answer yet? How have you coped with that?
I think we've all learned that in the last year, that's exactly a situation everybody's been in. And some of the calls we've been on with government ministers through lobbying groups we're part of have acknowledged that some of that government guidance was rough around the edges. So I think you had to interpret it appropriate for your business at that time. What we wanted to make sure was everybody was safe and well, that they went home as they came to work, and that we did everything we could to protect and support them. And we listened to what they wanted. So I think that for us was really important. We are a purpose-led business. So our purpose is bringing together ideas, energy and resources to make life better in our communities. So we do recognise a whole range of stakeholders. So not just our colleagues, but our members, because we're a co-op, so our members own our business, but also the communities that we're part of and we trade with. So for example, one of the big feedbacks we got from communities was that they wanted to be able to shop on behalf of shielding neighbours. And we did a lot to support and make that happen, working with local community groups. And our store teams got a huge amount out of being able to do that and be part of that. And we've also built long-term relationships now with our local food banks and helped establish food banks in other areas. Because for us as a purpose-driven business, we recognise food poverty is an issue we have to be part of the solution of.
Yeah, super, great. I know, Fabiola, you're doing a lot of work around kind of what your organisational values are, creating a great place to work. I'm just wondering, in terms of thinking about the purpose of the organisation and thinking about the employee experience, has any of that changed over the last year? Have you had to be more agile in terms of what you communicate, or rethink some of the work that was in place before that around values and around what a great place to work actually means? What is the employee experience now when a lot of people in your business were working remotely and at home?
Yeah, indeed, and even people in centres who'd be very much customer facing. So, but echoing a lot of what's already been said, I think that acknowledgement up front of we're all learning together, and a high degree of humility. You know, there's this sense of like, you know, we can't really make innovation unless we acknowledge what we don't know. So we then at least can start to face into it together and feel like a team. There's an enormous energy, enormous spirit. And there always has been a mission and values, but we were starting to look at refreshing that and actually putting our purpose up front and really honing what our purpose is about. And one of the things I think we spent a lot of time talking about at the beginning, and we carried through to the values, is what's true to us, what's in our DNA, and what's really McArthurGlen. We're very much a service-led business. Heard, you know, I think we're all kind of similar-minded on this call. You know, you think about your customers, your stakeholders, your communities, and it all joins up and it's taking care of them. We know people come to the centres because they're safe, they're clean, they're welcoming, they're lovely places to be, and we extend that. We try to extend that in everything we do. So certainly our purpose is about making the extraordinary possible for everybody, and that everybody is accessible in all sorts of ways. And so when we translated that into the values work that we did, we wanted to start within, and you know, it's not new. I don't think many new things under the sun these days, but we started with lots of teams and getting a very diverse, you know, set of voices into that mix, not top down, none of that sort of thing, utilising other data points that we had from customers and so on. So we refreshed our values. We didn't go through a ton of wordsmithing, when that's very easy to get sucked into that. but we really listen to people particularly close to our customers in our centres all around, and let them drive the wording, drive the meaning. And then also what we're doing as a second piece is, how does that come to life? We don't want a bunch of posters, we don't want all of that, so we're not going to laminate it, we're going to live it. And how do we do that? You know, how does it come to life? And we're letting them come up with the ideas. And that's also true to McArthurGlen. The people who run the centres, who work in the centres, are so brilliant with their ideas. Why we don't need to invent stuff, and we let it mushroom about. And if they want to share best practice, they can contact and share ideas across centres. So we have a champions network now, and that goes across countries as well. But again, it's all joining up to things like our inclusion and diversity strategy. We want to be holistic and coherent, that everything we do is listening to everybody as much as possible.
Great, super. I know, Una, you've been doing a lot of work around DE&I, well-being, the whole concept of being you at work. I think that kind of, you know, follows on nicely to what Fabiola said. Tell us a little bit about the journey that you guys have been on, and how that has manifested itself in the employee experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if I go back to 2019, when our just after our two companies came together, and our values are called together, we put in frameworks, well-being frameworks, diversity frameworks, and they were frameworks that we put a lot of time and energy into. But I've got to be quite honest, I think only in 2020 did they really become truly alive. So our diversity and inclusion framework was called Be You. It's about bringing our best self to work. I mentioned we have 70 plus nationalities in 13 different countries. So having a diverse and inclusive culture is really important, but the encouraging people to be themselves, in the workplace is important, to be themselves at home, and bringing that experience to 2020 was quite challenging, but we really focused on basics of, I guess, caring, connecting and communicating. We're people resources, we're human resources. So we kind of flipped it on its head and said, okay, let's resource our people. Let's really give them what they need. Let's give us all of ourselves what we need. So our well-being framework, very, very simple: healthy minds, healthy bodies, and healthy culture. And I was lucky enough to be connected with the Wellbeing Project a few years ago. And I really worked closely with them last year and saying, okay, this is what I think we need. This is what the surveys are telling us, but help us. And I think Fabiola's point of being, bringing humility and listening and saying help is so important. You know, last January, I had to Google what furlough meant, and I've been in HR for 30 years. So it's one of those things you don't have to have the answers, but you have to have very wide ears and not just listen, but hear.
I love the idea of having very wide ears. I also love live it, don't laminate it. I've written that down. That's something I'm stealing with Glee. You know, interesting, that whole piece around well-being, you know, it's been on the HR agenda for some time now. And I might say rather flippantly, it's sometimes sat kind of near the edges with a couple of free yoga passes that you might get on the intranet site. But so many of us have been, and so many of us who are joining this call will have our own well-being challenged over the last year. I know, Alison, we were talking about the fact that, you know, that whole thing of Zoom fatigue and people just being really tired. You innovated on a 2-year local delivery strategy and delivered it in 12 weeks. How on earth did you take care of people's well-being during that?
I think, again, it was just making sure everyone was clear of the plan and finding out what their pressure points were. I mean, as much as Zoom was a bit overpowering, that was the only way to keep connecting with people. I think keep talking was the way we got through it. I think we are a fast-paced growing company, and therefore it's always had big ambition. So that ambition is never a shock, which is helpful. I don't think anyone was surprised that just said, oh, we're going to go and do this. But I think it was just looking out for people. I know it was mentioned in the earlier session, we were really fortunate, you know, recruitment was easy. You know, there were lots of people that we were grateful to help and find jobs. We really leaned into our friends and family scheme. In terms of recruiting drivers, we actually made a decision to do that part-time, because one, that helps you build the business up, but two, you can make sure that people aren't burnt out as they're driving around here, there and everywhere. So we made sure every shop had a crew, if you like, of drivers they could call upon and make sure that the rotas were manageable. But at the same time, we did reduce shop opening hours as well. So I think that really helped our shop leaders learn this new skill of operating a van, because it'd been running for years in our franchise business. That was the model really we were trying to move towards in our own company owned. So really there was lots of learnings from our franchise, but I think reducing the shop hours and being clever with the amount of people we had available to access to drive the vans as the demand lifted, and boy, it lifted really quickly. That really, really helped.
I mean, what's interesting is we all deal with employees who operate on the front line with customers whose own well-being and mental health has been challenged, who aren't clear often of the rules, who've got masks on, masks off, exempt, non-exempt. I'm just wondering, from an HR perspective, how have you, and it's open to all of us here, how have you made sure that you're taking care of your people when they might be dealing potentially with some confrontational issues, some unpleasant conversations that need to take place at the front line? How have you taken care of their well-being and giving them the tools to be able to have those conversations with customers?
I'm happy to start off. So at Lincolnshire Co-op, we initially did online learning for all our colleagues around handling difficult situations, because we could see that suddenly there was a lot of conflict in workplaces around supply of goods. So we sell toilet roll. So early got faced into the challenge of the toilet roll crisis. And we also did online training around social distancing and COVID secure workplaces. But then we followed that up with some softer support for individual colleagues. So we offer employer paid counselling for all staff. But we also offer coaching, because we recognise signposting people to the right support is really important. A lot of people, that was about anxiety of being in the workplace at that time because of what was going on, and understanding what we could do to support them. But we also established a consultation forum on COVID-19 with colleagues both from the trade union, because we work with USDOR, our recognised trade union, but also wider colleagues. So we had about 20 colleagues come forward. We've met with them every 4 weeks throughout the whole of this, and that's been a huge opportunity to have a dialogue about what people want and need. So, for example, one of the things that came out of that was having new uniform with social distancing messages on it. That was something we were able to turn around really quickly, that meant staff felt we'd done something very practical, very visible to help them with those key messages in the workplace. We've also recognised our colleagues throughout. So we've had all colleague awards, extra bonus. We own a craft bakery, so on quite a few occasions, everybody's had cakes, both in their workplace and to take home, and that's always a way to smooth things over.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. We all like someone said the other day, you'll either come out of this as a hunk, a chunk, or a drunk, which I thought was quite an interesting way of thinking about it. Anyone else like to share in terms of how they took care of their frontline colleagues who potentially were having those difficult conversations?
I can jump in with echoing some of that. I think what we noticed, again, using that pandemic sort of upgrade a lot of services that we had maybe disparately and probably overprivileged in where around the head office, which is in the UK. So we took a chance to look across Europe and extend our service to everybody. So things like the employee assistance, the counselling, all of that sort of thing. So making sure we're reaching everybody, because we hadn't been consistent. So that had been one thing. But we've been doing a lot more sessions. We had to do more with line managers to help across everything, furloughed staff, people who were facing customers and so on. Did similar things around training. We've done quite a lot. We're very service orientated, so meeting customers and greeting, but making sure that the environment's really safe and that there's always something to our guest service offer is always quite robust. So making sure there's always the tools, because I really echo what Heather said, you know, it's listening, but then it's acting on it quite quickly. So what tools do you give them to work with straight away? And then we followed up recently. We're doing very informal time to talk sessions, and that's just really helped. And people love the fact, especially with Zoom fatigue, things are overstructured, you know, not another agenda, please, you know, all of that. It was just jump on, there is a theme, and we'd be talking about homeschooling, or be talking about all sorts of different things, but things that people bubbled up that they were important to them, and have inclusive topics. And then it was just lovely. It was just a very opening, you know, people then, you know, the chats and the emails and things have been flowing, and it's generated great ideas, ways to start to reduce time on Zoom calls, way to do things. And back to people having ideas, just hearing each other informally, talking, sharing, telling stories has been a really good way to you know, move things forward.
Right. I know you are very passionate personally, and your organisation is around DE&I, and a lot of what we're talking about is including people in the conversation, having authentic conversations. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done to keep DE&I as a focus over the last year, and how it's perhaps helped you achieve some of your engagement and cultural objectives?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mark, our framework is BU. It's called BU, and it was created. It was created. We had lots of conversations about what should we call it, and I remember sitting in a women conference in Paris that was going on for days and wishing that I was fluent in French, and I'm not. And so I was speaking to the other person who wasn't fluent in French, and I said, well, this is all great, but what are we trying to say? And we came up with BU in the break in the conference, and then we kind of shared it over dinner that evening, and then suddenly became BU. And that translated, yes, we have all the leadership message, but it also is like, what does that actually mean? We have the best diversity framework, but you click on our website, and it's mainly white, male, and middle-aged. So we really wanted to say, how can we make a difference? So by doing lots of things, I think I refer to a really powerful session we had group-wise and also across all of our 13 countries a few weeks ago, when we took the opportunity for International Women's Week to really say, okay, the mantle of International Women's Week is choosing to challenge. So we, all our employees say, what do we really want to challenge? And, probably in 2019, we would have gone to an agency and made a beautiful video. We did videos in our iPhones, and we asked people to give our message. And I've got to say, when I saw the first cut, and I'm pretty resilient, I literally, my eyes watered up because it was so authentic. It was taken from people's bedrooms and kitchens, and they're saying, I'm choosing to challenge. And we got so much positive groundswell, and just that this really feels different. And we had Mark, I should have got you, but I was the anchor in a session a few weeks ago with all our leadership team, and previously they may have felt needed to be quite corporate to introduce themselves, and they all introduced themselves. We have a wonderful Chief Resource Officer, Astrid, who's just a fantastic supporter of all engagement and diversity. And she opened up with, I'm a mom of 2 beautiful daughters and a husband. And she introduced that human feel, and then she talked, of course, about her role, etc. But that was just a huge difference, because when you look at our website, we are a corporate business, but bringing diversity and inclusion really down to who we are as people. And, a lot of our centers are in the US, and there was, the horrific killing murders last year, and the movement of Black Lives Matters. So, diversity and inclusion can't just be on our website. It can't just be lip service. It has to be living and breathing. And I'm very, very proud to be part of an organization that it truly, truly is. We had a new COO appointed on the 7th of January, and his opening speech, he talked about diversity and inclusion, because he had lived and breathed working in LA over the last 12 months. So really kind of felt and was part of the movement that is all across the world. So yeah, diversity and inclusion can't just be lip service. You need to walk and talk. You need to walk the talk. And make it real for people. Otherwise, it's just, lip service, which you might as well just rip up the poster.
I'm interested, actually, in terms of that piece around you. People have had genuine conversations around what we want to achieve, what our purpose is, what we mean around here. I'm just wondering if there's, without breaking any confidences, if anyone can think about conversations they've had with execs or with leaders in their particular business around a decision that needed to be made, and how your organizational culture sort of frames the outcome, frame that conversation, and then frame that outcome, what impact that had. Because that's when it's not just a laminate, you're actually living it when you're making a decision based on that. We'd love to hear experience of where culture drove a particular outcome in the business.
Well, if I can help here, we always say, how is this going to look in front of the local paper? We're a very physical retailer in communities. Today, you might say, how's that going to look on the local social media feed? But we always say that kind of test, how's that going to look if the outside world see this? So it's very easy for executives to make decisions in an executive bubble, but how's that going to look when your members, your customers, the people you hope to trade with, the people you hope to employ, when they see and hear about that decision? And you hope most of the decisions never get to that point where people are questioning and challenging you. But I think if you ask yourself that question in the first place, how's this going to look on the front of a newspaper?
I love that, the idea of actually saying what you know, where might it appear? I remember when years ago I was working at Boots the Chemist, and we bought a couple of chemist chains in Ireland. My family, O'Keefe, are from Ireland. I remember going over to handle all the union negotiations, and my father saying to me, don't do anything that would make your late grandfather ashamed. So he was sort of saying, you know, do your job, but don't. And it was I kept thinking, all right, what would Grandpa Andrew think of this? Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
Yeah, I did just pick up something that Una said. I thought I really do feel passionate about, and it's an interesting topic when we need the authentic leadership to step in. You have to. You've got leaders and your CEOs, and we've got 2 relatively newly appointed CEOs, and they're working brilliantly together, male and female. So it's lovely. There's a really obvious dynamic. And what's come through is that they are so personally engaged, and when they talk, you hear it, you hear that authenticity, and the team, it resonates with the teams. And again, that comes back to living it there, especially nowadays. We're on these Zoom calls and you're actually looking in people's homes, and we've commented. So you really do see your leaders and everybody in their more human aspect. And that's how everyone is starting to embrace this space. It's almost letting people inhabit that voice or that leader that they've always wanted to be. But also it's a fine line, you know, so that we're not just leader-led, that people feel genuinely enabled to, you know, to just be who they are, and that lovely be you at work, you know. So I don't need to wait for permission from a leader, but I feel comfortable because it's always endorsed by a leader. And so there's that, we're trying to think of that in our comms and our narrative, that to make that famous question of like, how do you sort of influence the culture? How do you make it much more fluid, permeable, agile? It just becomes the place rather than, and occasionally you do need things like your storytelling or your mechanisms or your leader calls, but how do we start to make it just genuinely live and breathe more? And I think all the informal mixed with the formal is so key.
Alison, I know you talked a little bit in our prep call around kind of the employee experience. I'm interested to hear about whether you've had to redesign the employee experience. And then the wider group one Alison's answered is, do you think expectations of the employee experience have changed for good? So Alison, can you tell us about what you did in terms of maybe redesigning or rethinking what the employee experience could be and how that impacts on the culture, or how the culture helps shape that?
Yeah, sure. I think firstly, undoubtedly, you know, life in a shop, and we are fortunate to have traded all the way through. It looks very different now. You know, we're now talking about bricks and clicks, whereas before, you know, e-commerce is now a thing at Cook, which might sound ridiculous to other larger companies out there. But certainly, you know, I think we all know in retail, we recruit extroverts, right? Because you need to enjoy talking to people, helping people. Here's the product. We need the product in our sort of chest freezers needs to come alive. And we noticed really quickly that it was really flat. And our shop leaders are full-time. Most of the rest of the team are part-time, but it's a long time in a shop that's very quiet when you're literally this extrovert character packing orders. So we really tried to do a lot about that. We managed to sort of get more IT into the shops in terms of the second iPad, that we could give more L&D sessions just to engage with shop teams, whether it was resilience or to the earlier point about how to deal with trickier customers that are having a bad day. We've really tried to get people involved in other projects. You know, we've got them to have a free lunch and then talk about the products. So trying to bring things to life and make it just a bit more interesting rather than a robotic packing of orders. And you know, to the second point around are people's expectations higher? I think anyone through this last year that hasn't felt anxious about something is really unusual. And I think we're dealing with heightened anxiety where people, rightly so, are more demanding. So I think they want their experience to be that much better each time. You know, they want to feel safe, they want to feel cared for and looked after. So I think reaching out from HQ, if you're working from home, has never been more important to say we're in this together and try and keep that connection.
And I think what's interesting, sometimes in retail environments, you get head office and then field staff as well. Has that been something you've had to address, or has it not been an issue over the last year?
I think, to be honest, no one said anything. I think I come from the ground in retail as part of my career, so I think I've always been quite tuned into it, that ivory tower concept, and no one's ever around after a certain time on a Friday. We are a 24/7 business with our manufacturing site, so I think we've tried to be on the front foot. Certainly our co-CEOs have done regular 30-minute catch-ups with leaders, just, you know, what's going on, how can we help you? That's been really helpful. They still, to this day, they were doing daily updates on email, they're doing twice weekly. We've kept our Welcome to Cook programme, which is essentially an onboarding programme where normally you'd visit the kitchen, but everyone gets a whistle stop because our recruitment has run a pace. So I think we're trying to be on the front foot. Do we get it right every time? Probably not, but we're doing our best, because we're thoroughly grateful that there are people turning up to work every day in sometimes challenging circumstances, you know, serving members of the public that are really grateful for our food. So we're just trying to sort of think through every eventuality.
Great, thank you. And to the wider group, do you think that the employee experience has changed forever? Or how much will we go back in terms of expectations of what we had in 2019?
I can jump in. I think we have got a shopping centre business and then a construction business. So our construction workers have been carrying on working throughout this. But we have, like everyone, done surveys, done communications, but basically just through talking of saying, what is the expectations? And I think there's very few one or two positives of COVID. The only positive I see is through the ability to improve the employer experience and improve flexibility and improve agility. And before COVID, we had in our business flexible working, but it was quite a difficult process to go through. And you know, we were like, oh, we work flexibly. We finish at 4 o'clock on a Friday. That was how much flexible we were. So I think going forward, you know, we've made a public statement or a public communication to our employees that, you know, we're not going back Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We're applying a flexi working system. Clearly, we have shopping centres, so we can have the flex there. And I think our employees expect that, you know, it makes no sense to go back to 2019 from an employee experience. You know, 2020 January, I think I had one Zoom call with my colleagues in Paris. So every Monday morning I was on the 5:35 train from King's Cross to Paris, Gare du Nord, because that was just the way we did it. And I say, if I had said, actually, no, let's just do a Zoom call, that would just not have been part of the culture. So I think, yes, our employees are expecting more. They're right to expect more. They're right to demand more. Things we put into place, such as wellbeing days, doubling sick days, just benefits that from a business point of view doesn't cost too much, but from an employee point of view is invaluable. So I think we're planning not to go back to the norm, because there's a new norm now. And I think to really attract talent, to keep talent, and to keep our people truly engaged, we need to share that we've changed our world because the world has made us change.
Super. I mean, I think, you know, retail has been really impacted and affected. Some retailers, they've seen massive growth. Some other retailers have not seen growth and staff have been laid off and redundancies. I'm just wondering, in terms of, as potentially there is a wider potential workforce to choose from out there and more talent on the market than there has been in the past, how you might be using your culture and your values and your purpose to really work out who are the best people to join your organization, when we may, at this particular time, have more people applying for roles than we actually ever had in the past. To the wider group.
So shall I start off? Like Alison talked about, we did a serious rapid recruitment process over a couple of weeks last March. Since then, we've consistently seen our average number of applications per vacancy stay well ahead of what we've known in previous years and previous times. We have gone on to virtual recruitment, and interestingly, as Una said, that's a new normal. We've already committed as a business as that's something we're sticking with. So for all our store entry-level roles, interviews are virtual by Zoom or Teams. We don't expect people to travel in for those interviews, and they will be conducted by a central person, not the store team. And you're right, in retail, we're recruiting on personality, and we can get to know people in this way. We also think that is more diverse, because actually it means people haven't got to travel in, they haven't got to make childcare arrangements to attend an interview that actually they're not paid to attend. So we think that's been a real step forward. Yes, there is a lot more applicants, but I think we also have to face into the fact that there are a lot of candidates applying for roles that perhaps isn't where they want to end up. So we are having a higher dropout rate currently with new starts, because they all hope to go back to what they did before, which is probably something at a higher level, more contract hours, different sector. So I think there is a period of flux while the economy settles down again, and we see what the future of the economy looks like as to what roles really exist. So I think that's certainly a testing period, I think, for those still recruiting, of how many of those people really want to work in the sector you're recruiting for, and how many of them are just applying because that is a sector that is recruiting, and so many others aren't.
Well, interesting, that whole piece around being purpose-driven, having a culture and your organizational values. Maybe somebody will join from a different sector temporarily, but how, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts around using your differentiated culture, purpose and value sets to keep that person? What are your thoughts around how you'll be able to make that? We had somebody on the last panel talk about how they had a captain from Virgin apply for a retail role and how they can keep that person in the business. So any thoughts on how you might be doing that to make sure that they decide not to go back to flying airplanes, but serving customers at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night?
Yeah, we've had a real... Oh, sorry, Fabiola.
Go for it, Alison.
It made me think when Heather was talking that, you know, this time last year we had hairdressers, we had private dining chefs, a whole range of people. And I think, like Heather, you know, we stuck to our guns, which was we recruited in exactly the same way, which that the questions are all around the values, and also, you know, what do you know about Cook, and do you actually want to work here, even if it is for a short period? And the second thing we've done is we've really encouraged line managers and leaders to talk to their new starters about the other opportunities. So interestingly enough, we've been able to get quite a few people out of retail into head office as that's grown over the last year. So to show the pathway, because not everybody wants to work in retail forever, and not everybody wants to work in a kitchen forever, but certainly there, you know, we try and get people to see the whole business and the opportunity and career growth. It doesn't work in every occasion. What I would say is when our chefs met our fine dining chefs that joined, they learned off each other. They were in awe that our chefs cook 1,000 portions, but didn't necessarily have the skills of filleting a fish for, you know, the prince of wherever. So I think it's just been a great experience. And I think if we make everyone feel welcome, hopefully they'll want to stay a bit longer if they can.
I love that idea also, showing people career paths and opportunities. I mean, I started at 15 in the Sainsbury's in the Holloway Road in London on the meat counter. And one of the things I love about retail is it's not about where you're from or your background or your education. Often it's about where are you going, and what do you want to achieve? And I think it's one of the only industries in the world that if you've got the will, we can give you the skill, and you really can. My old job when I was at Pizza Hut UK, our CEO started in pot wash part-time in a kitchen and ended up being the CEO of the UK business. And I think that only happens in our sector, which is why I love it. Fabiola, you were going to come in there as well.
Well, partly I wish I could attract an airline pilot to our work. That would be interesting, just for that diversity, you know, because I'm sure they wouldn't think of us, and that's front of mind for us. Who wouldn't think of coming to a shopping centre to work, you know? So we're starting to, and you talked about how do you use your values and mission to think differently, and we're testing ourselves, say, how do we normally go to recruit? How do we widen that pool, and how do we attract difference? Because to that point, you know, you get innovation, you get people learning from each other. And we definitely want to see it, but also work I've done in the past and we're bringing up now, again, looking at career paths, or actually how else can we call them, because they're no longer those linear paths. But, you know, and in this new world, you know, everyone talks about, well, actually there's job titles we haven't thought of yet that are going to be there in 5 years. So maybe some of those people will be defining their own job in the future purely because they come in with such a different mindset, or they will look at that digital and, you know, the bricks and mortar business mix and start to see it differently. So well, I think there's an element, like we were saying earlier in the call, of embracing a bit more of the unknown, because we don't have all the answers. So you have to be a bit brave, and I'm not saying we're there yet in all of our recruitment, but being a little bit more courageous perhaps with some of our hires, but especially on the what, because I think what we're all often saying is the how is so important. The behaviours, the mindset, the culture, the personality that you bring in is so key. And I think one thing I would say, hand on heart, across our whole business, there's such a huge spirit and energy of helping each other out, helping the customer. So you may not have all the skills, but we can certainly help train people with that. And we're not making enough use of apprenticeships, for example. So we know that's something we want to look at. And there are lots of avenues that we've still got to explore. But I think all of that added together will help with a longer term diverse mix of the workforce.
We've all been learning as we've gone along, and as I said, someone said in the last session, making it up as we go along. And from our world in innovation, part of agile working is about being honest about when you don't know. But as leaders, whether it's leaders in the HR communities or leaders across the business or store leaders, often you've kind of done that job before, or at the end of the day, you can coach and support someone, but actually you do know the answer and you can eventually say, you need to do this. We haven't been able to do that. So how, particularly with your HR teams, have you kept them engaged and motivated, knowing that we haven't always had the answer? I mean, it might have to take 48 hours to come back or do something that's unpopular. How has it been okay to say, I don't know?
I just jump in. So I think having humility and honesty. We had a number of things in 2020 that I'd never done before. So, for example, we closed part of our Italian business in a government dismissal ban. So that was quite challenging. And I shared a little story. So we talk about recognition, and I smiled when Heather and Alison were talking. I shared a story with my team, and this is quite an embarrassing one. I'll do the short version. Last April, we had closed the centres, and I was in the office trying to just make sure that everything was safe and secure. And there was about 4 or 5 of us in, and I went to make a coffee. And every time I went to the coffee, I said, who is leaving this tap running? Would they do this at home? No. So throughout the course of the day, every time I went to a kitchen area, the tap was running. And I was like, are you kidding me? Turn off the tap. Anyway, we had a group kind of socially meeting at the end of the day. And I kind of said, I've got to say, whoever's leaving the tap turning, please turn it off. And our head of risk went, are you the one who keeps turning it off? And because our head of risk was also in that day. And because no one had been in using the toilets, the water wasn't flushing through. So he had to flush. So his role, he was like turning all the taps on to ensure that the water was flushing through to try and prevent Legionnaires. And I was turning the taps off. So I shared that very simple story with my team to say, we try to get things right. We think we're doing the right things, but sometimes we get it wrong. And I think that was and I shared that with my team, and they all just started laughing, saying that is so good, because we were doing things like furloughing. We had a significant redundancy programs, IR35, and we were doing things that were new to the team. So it was almost that recognition that we're not always going to get it right. We have to rely on each other. We have to care for each other, and it's okay to say, can you help? So that little story, the head of risk still brings up that example every time I see him, but it made me laugh, but also made me just take a moment to think, actually, I thought I was doing the right thing and I was doing the complete opposite. So
I love that. Thank you. Absolutely bringing that to life. And actually that piece around not knowing, again, as HR leaders, you've had to be agile, learn new stuff, watch the announcements from the Prime Minister on the Friday with bated breath, wondering what's going to happen next. Whilst taking care of your people, making sure that you are creating the best employee experience, how have you taken care of yourselves? How have you looked after yourselves? Because ultimately people do look to you and say, what are we going to do? And on a Friday at 5:30, when number 10's on in the background, sometimes maybe you haven't known. So what have you done to look after yourself that our colleagues on this line, on this panel, on this conference can learn from? So Fabiola, apart from fantastic interior design, what have you done to take care of yourself?
Well, I'm now worrying about chunk, hunk and drunk, because I probably am the third, but we won't go there. So yeah, I guess probably not enough is the truth. But partly I think, like we said, is a sharing it. So we do have team talk. So on a sort of work end of it, just actually being able to have some time with my team, just as a group of people, have fun, have quizzes, have a glass of wine together. Some of those things, but just a really nice space where we have not talked about work, not enough of those times sometimes. Have, you know, tried to make enough time with the family. It's been challenging with homeschooling and all of that kind of thing, and try to keep up a certain amount of physical exercise and all that kind of thing regularly. So, and I'm a big believer in that holistic health thing. So I do talk about that. I've done yoga, I've done mindfulness. We start sessions in our teams with some mindfulness as well. So we start a team call. If we're not in the mood, we don't do it. If we're in the mood, we'll do it. So it's not forced. You know, it's not all those sorts of things. So generally trying to keep up enough consistency in that. And some weeks have been dreadful and variable, and some weeks have been, you know, certainly latterly the first half of furlough, the 6 months were unrepeatable, I'd say. But yeah, I think sharing it, talking about it, us hearing about what we're all doing, and trying to lay off the bread, cheese and pasta and wine.
Oh gosh, if only. Super. Heather, what have you done apart from look out the view from your beautiful conservatory? What have you done to take care of yourself over the last year?
I think it's been absolutely hectic, and I think Fabiola's right. When you look back and you think, how on earth did we get through that? I also chaired our coronavirus response team business-wide, and I did that from March and last year until January, when I felt it was probably time I took a break from it. I wanted to focus back on my own team. I think bringing your team together and sharing ideas, talking about what you're doing, how it's going, how it feels, that's really important. But I think we all recognise a lot of leaders have learned a lot about authenticity, about being human, and about admitting I've had enough and I need to take a break, and I don't have any more answers to the questions right now, and I'm really sorry. And that sometimes we don't like to say that. Some of us probably have never said that before in our careers, but I bet in the last year we've all had times where we've had to say, I don't know the answer to the question because I've never heard the question before. You touched on furlough. Who knew that an American employment concept would become the bread and butter of HR in the UK? Who knew the difference between vulnerable and clinically extremely vulnerable? But we all do now, and we've all done it. And I think that's where HR as a profession needs to give itself a pat on the back and say, you know, we have supported our colleagues, we have come through, and we are looking to the side of that and how we move forward. And I think it's absolutely right in the comments that have been made here that diversity and inclusion have come to the fore in the last year for so many reasons, not least around the impact that COVID has had on some of those with certain protected characteristics, and how people's understanding has grown exponentially as a result of that.
Super. Great. Alison, what have you done to take care of yourself apart from eat your lovely, nutritious and delicious meals?
Yes, yeah, Fabiola, you made me laugh because I had exactly the same thought about which category linking to food. Back to the airline analogy, there's a great one around put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And someone that said that to me a couple of years ago, and I've really thought about that more than ever in the last year. So I've done that. And one of the ways I've done that is I've been much better at asking for help. So I think as leaders, sometimes we have pride and we'll do the right thing with our teams. And I've put my hand up a lot quicker for advice. And in particular, I've networked a lot more with fellow B Corps, because we're a B Corps, particularly manufacturing. So, you know, because they're a smaller size like us, and I found that incredibly helpful. Sometimes just to hear someone say, oh yeah, that's hard, isn't it? Or we don't know either. You kind of go, great, cool, but you feel better. So I think that's really helpful. I've taken lots of solace, space on my own, like slipping out early in the morning for a walk, just a bit of space, because you know you're going to be talking to people all day and not always face to face. And as Heather said, I've got better at recognising when I just need a break, and generally it's when I'm getting a little bit more irritated by things than normal. I think, when did I last have a proper day off or a proper time? So I've been much better at that. But yeah, put your oxygen mask on first as a leader. That's great advice, and it's really helped me.
I love that. Oh, and it reminds me of the days of flying.
I know, that's the sad thing about it.
We'll do it again. Una, have you taken care of yourself?
I think in the first lockdown, probably not very well. I could probably tick the drunken chunk box a lot, especially because I think, is it 1 o'clock yet? So mainly then listening to my own advice. So I did like global daily well-being emails and, you know, introduced like Calm, etc. And then I realized, actually, we have all these employees. I've just signed up and I actually haven't utilized the app. So the first lockdown, I think I look back and think I could have done much better. I was putting all my time and energy into the world I was supporting and maybe forgetting to support myself. Then the second lockdown, my husband bought me a present of weights. So I think I may have said something, oh, I must get some weights someday. And they sat in a box for about 2 months. And now I'm very proud to say I do them every morning. And I've signed up for an imaginary marathon. It doesn't exist, but in my head, I'm training for it. And that just gives me time to get out of the garage, get into the park and just run. Nobody's timing me. It doesn't matter how long I do it. I just go out and I do a lot of thinking and challenging of myself by myself in the park. So when I come back, I'm fully resourced to be a better resource for others.
Super. I love that idea of the imaginary marathon. I've got really into the idea of kind of micro habits rather than saying I'm going to do couch to 5K, little micro habits. It was based on a book I read by called The Shed Method by Sarah Milrow. Fantastic. Taking care of your sleep, hydration, exercise, and diet. And it's been given me the pillars over the last year to make better choices, those micro habits around my shed. Well, last question. We've got a couple of minutes left. I'm just wondering, HR have become absolutely to the forefront. We have stepped in and been a vital part of driving business and culture and the experience over the last year. How are we going to keep our feet firmly under the table? So you've got 30 seconds each. How are we going to make sure that HR's presence when we are beyond COVID is still felt and we're still there influencing decisions? So Una, you were nodding. I'll go with you first. Whoever moves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Carrying on being present. I'm present to all of our employees through this medium, but very much being present when this medium is just part of our world and we're back. And you know, continuing connecting, and I think human resources have really come into their own in the businesses. Really recognize the importance, and when your shopping centers shut, when your retail outlets shut, people is the only resource we have. So I always did think, but this year I think human resources is the most important role in any business, and making sure we've got a place at the table, so to make sure we stay there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fabiola, you're nodding now, so my eye's gone to you. What are you doing to make sure that you keep your feet under the table?
Yeah, totally echo that. I love the word presence, but very gestaltist in that origin. So that being connected to each other, both within HR, but to the whole business, because I think that's what it's done for us. It's not just a side part. HR often talks about the business and HR. No, we're all part of it. But I think also I've always gone back to Peter Senge, the learning organization. I think that's one thing it's taught us again, is to be perennially learning. It's a pandemic last year, this year, something else. There's other things, digital. We've never really gone through that. AI, goodness knows what else is coming. So keeping that lovely present, listening, agile mindset and that growth mindset going, and that dialogue and all the stuff that we are starting to really play with now, and improvise more.
Super. I love improvising more. Super. Heather, you rock back and forth, so you got my eye.
Yes, I already have a seat at the top table. I report to the CEO, and she is the most people person you could want within an organisation. I also manage health and safety, so I think we've very clearly been in the eye of the storm in the last 12 months. And I think that understanding of where risk fits in the business and how people can be very high on your risk register has got a much greater understanding. So for me, it's about looking at how we support our back to the new normal, whether that's office-based staff or whether that's workplaces post-COVID, post-social distancing, fingers crossed, and post-face coverings. So I think that's looking ahead. There's lots of opportunities there.
Great, super. And Alison, finally to you.
I think very similar to everyone else. I think we've all been able to showcase that we are proactive, we are well-rounded. I think vanished are the days of just HR being tea and sympathy. And I think we'll just keep reminding people that we're there to look after people and their customers, and just keep the dialogue going. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting as we move beyond COVID, and we've got a real opportunity as a profession to absolutely learn and grow and keep ourselves at the forefront. Well, listen, thank you so much, Fabiola, Alison, Una, Heather, for sharing your experiences with us. I'm sure everyone has lots they can steal with glee from our session this afternoon. And those of you who are joining us this afternoon, we have a wonderful session at 1:30 today. We touched on it ever so slightly there in the last bit, Fabiola, which is around HR's role in making optimal use of technology to support and digitally enable the employee experience. So thank you again for the fantastic stories. I'll never forget the tap one. Live it, not laminate it. Fantastic. Have a great afternoon, and
Thank
everyone
you.
else, we'll see you at 1:30 for our next session. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.